That's incredibly powerful. Let's talk about another principle, which is the STAR principle. And I first learned about that reading Richard Koch's book by the same name. And I know you and Richard have a relationship. You've done, work together, all that kind of stuff. But tell us, what is the STAR principle for people who are not familiar with it?
So STAR principle is probably, it's the simplest way of describing everything that in hindsight it actually worked in my career. It was like, you realize that everything you've ever done that's actually worked fit this little pattern here. And the pattern was being number one in a growing market. And that the person who is number one in a growing market gets a disproportionate amount of the profit and the growth and the benefit and everything. And to be quite frank with you, the next person and the next person and the next person are all fighting over the scraps. This is how the world works. So what does that mean? And well, it means that if you're not number one, you carve off a slice of the market that nobody's addressing, and you be number one in that. And like, this applies to every level of scale, from literally a lemonade stand to billion-dollar Coca-Cola, General Motors. Okay, so for the individual consultant, okay, let's say that might give me pull an example of any consultant that you work with, industry, profession, go.
Yeah, there's so many, but let's just take a consultant that serves manufacturing companies and helps them with the improving their profitability through efficiency and making sure that their employees are working at high levels of productivity, and maybe they apply Kaizen or lean and all that kind of stuff.
Perfect. Okay, so let's say that you're a Kaizen consultant for manufacturing. Well, there's only like 5,000 of those. Okay, but can you niche yourself to a subset of, maybe it's a subset of Kaizen, like that's a huge topic. So there's all these little niche areas, right? To where you could be the number, I don't know what they are, but like you're the number, like there's a new emerging thing and it has something to do with big data or whatever. And like, can you be the number one person in that little slice? Or maybe you're the number one person in like some specific vertical within manufacturing. Like for about 5 years, I was the number one direct marketing and copywriting consultant in industrial networking, which is a sliver. But see, you can make a good living in a sliver of an industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, if you're I was the number one in that tiny sliver. And for the first few years of hanging on my shingle and doing that whole scary thing that all of your listeners are familiar with, it wasn't frankly that hard to make a perfectly reasonable living, make my car payment, make my mortgage, feed my kids. My wife kind of liked it. It was like, we actually have some money for the first time in our life now, right? Yeah. But are you number one in a growing market? Of course, the growing market part's important too, because if you're number one in something that was really hot in 1993, well, fine. But this is so important. And it even comes down to individual product lines. Like, you shouldn't even introduce a new product unless that product can be number one in some part of a growing market. Otherwise, why waste your time?
So I think this is a real source of challenge and frustration for many consultants and advisors and those in the professional services, because on one side, they understand, people understand the importance of niching down and creating specialization. And so this principle will really resonate. At the same time, on the other side, it's, well, by doing that, I'm limiting opportunities. If I say I'm only working with industrial automation, companies in the networking space, like, well, what about the other type of automation companies or other types of manufacturing companies that I could help? What's your response to them? Because I know you've worked with clients in many, many different industries over the years, Perry. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'll give you an example from my own world. So about 15 years ago, I became known as the Google Ads guy. Okay. And now I understand, as a consultant, in the grand scheme of things, the best consultants are generalists. The best consultants know a lot of stuff about a lot of things, and that's the best way to have longevity. Okay. And I encourage you to do that. Indulge yourself and go read all the books that you think are interesting and go down the rabbit hole and get certified if that's going to help. Fine. Okay. But when you're trying to open doors, the best way to open a door is for people to easily pigeonhole you. And I know you don't like to be pigeonholed. Look, I know all this other stuff. Yeah, I know, but just get known for big data applications of Kaizen and industrial networking or whatever the tiny little slice is. Make yourself famous. In fact, make it so anytime that subject comes up over in that little corner of the world, people will always think of you. And that will make your phone ring. Here's what would always happen when I got famous for Google is I had all these people, well, I wrote a book and they're reading my book and everything. They would come to these workshops. They all thought that their problem was their Google ads. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes that was actually true. Okay? But most of the time, time after time after time, I'd sit down with a client and I would ask him 100 questions and it'd be like, we've been here for 2 hours and we haven't done Google yet. Well, yeah, because that's not your real problem. It's like, I'm trying to get to your real problem. Okay. That's where you balance the generalist who's like, because Michael, would you agree? Most clients don't even know what their problem actually is.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So the typical scenario is your client thinks that this identifiable thing that you're famous for is his problem. So he comes to you and he hires you. And then you start working together and you figure out, you know what, that's not really your problem. This is your problem. If we fix this broken bone, your leg will stop hurting. They're like, okay, fix my leg. So does that kind of balance it out a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great, information. It's a great way of looking at it because it makes it more digestible for people. What I always say to clients is you're not putting this, like your sword is not going into the stone that you can never take it out again, right? This is about getting moving in the right direction. And as you start doing that by deciding on which path to take, a lot of things then become clear to you. You're able to take these hypotheses and beliefs that you have, validate them, make progress, get business going, and that business and those opportunities will create new opportunities, open new doors for you. I think that's really what you're saying through your own experience as well, and we've certainly seen that too. So